Hey, welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to be talking about Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars today. You know, I read it a couple weeks ago. I've been wanting to talk about it, kind of give like a informal review of it. You know, I'm still not really sure how I want to review certain books or whatever, but you know, I've been wanting to talk about this one for forever. So I went on a kind of a Jonathan Hickman journey for a while. Basically, solely what I read was his works from the beginning of his Fantastic Four and Future Foundation series, all the way through Avengers and New Avengers and Infinity, all the way up to Secret Wars. And I wanted to do that because I've heard, that Hickman kind of encapsulates his work in and of itself. You know, it is affected by certain other things that happen in the Marvel universe, but really it's like it's all one big story. There are things that happen in Future Foundation and Fantastic Four that get called back to an Avengers and New Avengers. Things that happen in Infinity and Secret Wars that get called back to both of those. So on and so forth. And, I really appreciate that kind of storytelling. It's kind of like Grant Morrison to a degree. I find a lot of things Grant Morrison does in his Justice League run in the 90s are like setups for things like Final Crisis and his Batman series. So I really like that kind of, consistent storytelling, the callbacks and all that stuff. It's what I love the most about certain comics, to be all the way honest with you. Making things kind of feel contained but big. So I read all the way through, like I said, Fantastic Four, Avengers, New Avengers, Infinity, and Secret Wars. I haven't gone past Secret Wars because I was like, I really don't want to continue reading some of them without talking about it. I wanted it to be fresh in my mind. So here we are. So if y'all don't know what Secret Wars is, I'm going to give kind of a good amount of plot details. There's going to be some spoilers in here. So if you don't want spoilers, I would click off this channel because right now there's no way I can really talk about what I want to talk about without spoiling it. So if you don't know what happens in Avengers and New Avengers, there are these events that start called the incursions. And an incursion is when basically in Marvel Comics, the Earth is kind of like the center of the universe. It's the most important planet to the Marvel universe. Pretty much in every single universe in the multiverse, Earth is like the focus, and in Avengers and in New Avengers, the multiverse starts collapsing in on itself. Basically, two universes with Earth as the focal points will smash into each other. And when the Earths collide, it destroys both universes. And what happens is the Avengers and the Illuminati have to find a way to stop these incursions from happening. And what they do is they are left with only really one course of action, and that's to destroy another Earth. What happens is if one Earth is destroyed, the universes won't collide. And even though that other Earth dies, its whole universe besides it will survive. So that's like trillions upon trillions of people being saved at the expense of usually of billions, and I think that is I don't want to spend too much time on the Avengers part of this because, I really want to talk about the event book itself. But I thought that was a really cool way to present a new moral dilemma to the Avengers and really give a sense of like urgency and major stakes, involved. And the story doesn't happen quickly. Hickman draws it out really well. And he really lets the entire thing play out. You get to see every little facet, you get to see every little thing be tried in order to avoid having to destroy another Earth. And eventually they basically have to come to the decision to do it. And I really appreciated that. I really appreciated that. There's not only a central storyline, there's a lot of other stuff that happens in the Avengers run, besides the incursion part of it, in the lead up to Secret Wars. But really, the whole backbone of the whole thing is the incursions and this follow through, or this through line through the plot that leads up to Secret Wars and stuff that builds up to that event really, really well. And at the end of it, essentially, we find out that these beings called the Beyonders have actually been collapsing the multiverse, destroying it as part of essentially a science experiment. Okay. The Beyonders they're not from the multiverse. They're actually almost like beings of thought, like ideas, essentially. They don't really have physical, manifestations. If you know Galactus, when people look at Galactus, Galactus takes the form of whatever race you are, so that you can kind of conceive of what you're looking at, because he's so massive, and his true form would be hard for people to reconcile. The Beyonders are kind of like that, where they don't really have physical forms, but when they come into physical space, they take the form of these kind of like aliens, these gray aliens. Like if you've ever seen the classic, green or gray alien archetype in sci-fi stuff, or like in UFO conspiracies or whatever, then imagine that, but with kind of like suits of armor, white suits of armor, and the Beyonders are an offshoot of the original Secret Wars comic. So the Secret Wars I'm talking about is the Secret Wars from 2015 by Jonathan Hickman. There is a original Secret Wars back in the 80s, I believe. And that's where the Venom symbiote gets introduced, the black suit for Spider-Man. The original concept for the Secret Wars thing starts there, Battle World, all that stuff. And in that, there is a single Beyonder who takes the form of a man, but he is really a god. And he kind of essentially starts clashing the superheroes together like he's a kid with toys. That's essentially what happens there. In this one, the Beyonders are confronted by Doctor Doom, Doctor Strange, and the Molecule Man, Owen Reese. And Doctor Doom actually uses Molecule Man to create a bomb that destroys the Beyonders. The Molecule Man is essentially, there's a version of him in every universe, and he's basically the same person in every universe. And he's connected to each of his... We'll call him that, essentially. His multiversal... Essentially, every Molecule Man in every universe is connected to each other. So him and Doctor Doom, they create a plan to where they will kill essentially all the other Molecule Men in every other universe, because that will essentially destroy the universe that they're in, and the resulting energy explosion can be used to destroy the Beyonders. I'm kind of condensing that a bit. It's a little more complicated than that, but really that's what it is. And, so Doctor Doom confronts the Beyonders. He has this whole badass thing that happens at the end of the New Avengers run. It's really fucking cool. He does the whole Doom spiel. He's the one who destroys gods. Gods bow to him. He is Doom in literal and metaphorical sense. The whole nine yards. And he ends up destroying the Beyonders. But the problem is that from that, so many universes died, but the Molecule Man himself is essentially a god. He kind of has some problems with, because he's connected to all of his other selves. He is a little like schizo, essentially. And so he's kind of a dangerous character. From what I've seen, I don't know if he's evil, but he's dangerous in the sense of he doesn't really always understand what he's doing. And he's, like I said, a little schizo. The stuff that he does is kind of like, whoa. Basically what happens is Doctor Doom uses the power of the Molecule Man to create an amalgamation of all these other universes to keep as many people alive. And he basically crushes them together and creates Battle World. And Battle World is a feudal state, apparently, like essentially. There's barons, there's fiefdoms, there's, warriors and knights. It's basically, it's a bunch of people from different universes in the Marvel multiverse all put together, and they all there's certain people are chosen as leaders to rule over certain aspects of Battle World. Like there's a whole Thor community, there's a whole Hulk community, so on and so forth. And there's different aspects to Battle World. I don't want to get too deep into it because I could talk about that all day. But Doom puts himself over as ruler of Battle World, and he turns into God Emperor Doom. I don't know if you've ever seen, but there's there's images of God Emperor Doom floating around. If you've seen Doom in a white suit, a white outfit, the whole white cape, white armor, and everything, that's God Emperor Doom. And essentially, he's using the Molecule Man Owen Reese's powers to rule over as God himself in Battleworld. Everybody bows to him. He lets everybody kind of have their little piece of the pie, but they all answer to him at the end of the day. And he also, Doom is kind of the hero of the Avengers, New Avengers story in a way, but he also is still a villain. And what he does is everybody that lives, he erases the memories of what was before. So everybody that lives only knows Battleworld. That's all they know. They don't know that there was a whole nother multiverse out there. They don't know that they all came from separate universes. They know that there was one big calamity kind of thing, and Doom saved them all. Kind of like a religion of sorts, a religious history, religious lore. They look at Doom as God, in which he kind of is in this story. He does things that that are far beyond his power. Doom is a powerful character, but the things he does in Secret Wars and the end of Avengers and New Avengers is next level stuff. Not many people can compete with that level of power, especially not in Battleworld. So he rules over Battleworld, and he takes the Richards family, he takes the Richards family, Susan, Franklin, and Valeria as his own. So he is married to Susan. Valeria and Franklin are his children. He gets rid of, Johnny Storm. He uses Johnny as basically as the sun in Battleworld. He's Johnny is permanently fixtured to the sky in Battleworld, creating the sun, essentially giving them light. And then the Thing, he gets tossed out and creates essentially this big border between Battleworld and what I think they call the Wildlands. It's some really kind of fucked up stuff, to be all the way honest with you. It's crazy what he does. And, there's a lot of Doom, again, he did save everybody, but, obviously the ethical implications of this are bad. He is morally wrong in this situation, even though he did something morally right. But, I kind of like that about Doom in general. Reed Richards has always kind of been like that. Not in what I've seen in the beginning of it. He's kind of like that in Avengers, especially happened in the end of the universe and multiverse happened comics. Reed, as far as and a few other heroes, including people like Thanos, they all stowed away on a ship that was able to protect them from the time collapse, the universal collapse. And when Doom basically crushed everything together, they were protected from, getting their memories erased. They didn't live in Battleworld. Essentially, their ship crash landed and showed up one day. Reed knows this is all fucked up. Reed knows the truth. Everybody on the ship knows the truth. And so their Secret Wars takes place where it starts off, you get the sense of what Battleworld is like. Just a little bit after that, you get introduced to Reed and them, who become the focal heroes of the story, the focal point heroes, and they try to essentially stop Doom from ruling over Battleworld and see if they can fix everything. Put the universe back the way it was, put the multiverse back the way it was. So. From there on, it's a really, really cool story. There's a really kind of Game of Thrones aspect to some of it. Some of it's very brutal. The world itself is very brutal. Doom's character, obviously, Hickman writes Doom so well. I love Hickman's version of Doom. He really seems to get the character and love the character. And I think he kind of gets, what the best way is to write Doom, and that the fine line between hero and actual villain that Doom kind of rides. And I like that he didn't, there's not a lot of heroism, in this book. Really, it's a secret war. not to be that kind of on the nose, but that's really what it is. It's a secret war between Doom, who rules over it, and Reed, who knows the truth, And there's a lot of drama in the story. A lot of, Reed trying to get his family back, even though they don't remember him. And, people like Valeria being as smart as she is, kind of understands that there's something very off about all this. And even though she doesn't remember Reed, she kind of helps him out at some point and kind of convinces Susan to trust what Reed is saying. And it turns out that Molecule Man is actually essentially in the center of Battle World, powering the whole thing and letting Doom use his power to rule over Battle World. And Molecule Man's kind of just okay. He's just kind of along for the ride, is what it seems like. And it's very, I don't even know what the right word is to say epic, I guess. And I hate using that word epic. It's very overused in a lot of contexts, but there's not really a better word that I can describe Secret Wars as. And it's a very kind of personal story in a way. There's a grand scope to it, but at the core of it is the relationship between Reed and Victor, Victor Von Doom, and kind of what the issue is with their relationship, how they're both so connected that they could never be unconnected. There's never going to be a time where Victor and Reed aren't a part of each other's lives to some degree. Doom is Valeria's godfather, and obviously he loves Susan. He's kind of jealous of Reed. He's not kind of jealous of Reed. He is jealous of Reed. He's jealous that there's something about Doom that his own ego won't let him overcome his own faults. His ego is so vast that it's something that he can really never get over. And he thinks that he deserves the things that Reed has, and in a sense, he's not necessarily wrong. Sometimes Doom proves to be overall smarter and more prone to ingenuity and going off the cuff than Reed is in some degree. Reed, I think overall in terms of raw intelligence, may be smarter, but Victor is kind of more polished in how he comes up with plans, how he executes certain plans. He's willing to do things that others can't when it's the right time to put some sort of morals to the side. Doom is willing to do that. And Doom has his own set of morals. He's not like other villains where he is just evil. He kind of has he has a moral code. It's just different than everybody else's. And some people might say ethically the things he does are wrong. Some of his morals are skewed, but he doesn't kill people willy-nilly. He doesn't do that. He rules over Latveria with honestly, it's authoritarian to a degree, but it's not authoritarian in the way that everybody in Latveria is living in squalor. Everybody in Latveria loves Doom because even though they may not have freedom, they live really good lives. And for the most part, there is certain freedoms in Latveria that Doom allows. It's just that he's the kind of person when the best food is grown in Latveria, he gets the best food first, and then everybody gets the rest of the food. But in Latveria, all the food is good, kind of thing. Yeah, Doom gets the best. Doom gets the best, but he's not giving shitty stuff to people. He's not taking away everything and acting like he's giving you something. He actually gives people a good life in Latveria. So his morals are kind of skewed, but not so skewed that he can be called a straight up dictator in that sense, or a super villain in that sense. It's kind of hard to put Doom in a box to that degree. And Reed, Reed kind of puts up with Doom in a lot of ways. He kind of he wants to save Doom. In a way, he looks at him, I don't know if I want to say friend, but more like a brother that you bicker with all the time and you can't see eye to eye, but that's still someone that to a degree you love. It's kind of hard to phrase, Reed and Victor's relationship, kind of sharply, but I think that's the best way I can describe it. And, but Secret Wars is essentially kind of Reed coming to the boiling point. Everything Victor's done, he's just he's over it. He's over it, and it's gone too far. And really what he tells Doom, in their last confrontation is that, you could have saved everything. I know you could have saved everything. You have the power to do that, but you won't let yourself get over your ego to do something like that. You just had to rule everything. You could have put every universe back the way they were, but instead you decided, no, I'm gonna save everybody, but I'm gonna put them under my rule in one world, and he's like, he kind of tells Victor, like, you're the only one holding yourself back, essentially. And I think that is it's a really great piece of writing. I think it's really poignant. And in the end, Victor even Richards reads like, you're what it is you think I could have done better. You won't let yourself do what I could have done, and essentially, and Victor agrees. He says, yes, like, damn you. Yeah. Like, and then like essentially saying to Reed, I know you could have done better, and I know I should have done better, but even in that moment, Victor, yeah, he admits it, but his ego won't allow him to let Reed get away with it. Even though he's the one that admitted it, he still views Reed as the one that pushed him that far, that wouldn't let him, save everybody to begin with. He blames it all on Reed, no matter how much of Doom's fault it is, And so Molecule Man, having, sitting there and hearing the whole thing, is like, oh, well, if you both agreed that Reed could have done better, I'll just give Reed the power. And, in the end, Reed, Franklin, and the rest of the Fantastic Four start putting the universes kind of back the way they were. And at that point in comics, I think it was kind of framed as if Marvel was going to restart the Marvel multiverse, restart the Marvel universe, kind of, give a fresh take on all of it. The problem was they didn't follow through with that. Everything kind of maintained a status quo. And I'm sure if you read it, and if you read Hickman's story from the beginning of Fantastic Four all the way through, you kind of get the sense that he was trying to gear up Marvel for something like that. And they just, I don't know why, they just couldn't do it. I think that I don't want to deduct points from Secret Wars just because Marvel as a company was afraid to do what it seemed that they needed to do. It kind of reminds me of Final Crisis in DC. Final Crisis kind of felt like, a reset. A lot of the crises in DC kind of feel like a reset, but generally a lot of them don't get the follow through that they need. Really one of the only ones in DC that I can really name and be like, okay, that's a total reset that worked. And even then it really didn't work because what followed was kind of shitty, was Flashpoint into the New 52. And I know that DC has also restarted their universe, I think, not too long ago with Infinite Frontier or something like that. I haven't caught up with DC Comics in a little bit, so I may be getting that wrong. But yeah, I think that's the problem with some of these bigger comic book companies is they are afraid to change. They are afraid to update. They want to maintain the status quo because in their mind, everybody just wants that, when really, and they see sometimes they take chances, and sometimes the chances don't work out, and they think, okay, people didn't like that because we took a chance. And really it's just that the chance you took was not the right chance. The writer was not good, usually something like that. We all are okay with change. In fact, we would prefer change. But whenever a chance on change is taken, it usually doesn't work because at the fault of, too many mandates. The writer is not really focusing enough on creating a good story rather than, one big sweeping thing. It's not that we don't want change. We just want good stories. I think that's what it is. And in terms of this, Marvel held that back. I think that was a mistake, but it doesn't really affect the story as a whole, and I don't think it really takes away from the story as a whole. So yeah, Secret Wars, I think is fantastic, man. It's one of my favorite event books I've read for sure. I love Final Crisis. I think this actually might be up there with Final Crisis for me. I think Final Crisis is a little more, it takes a little more or a few more chances. It takes a few more chances than Secret Wars. It's a little more ambitious than Secret Wars, but I think Secret Wars overall is actually better executed. And, Secret Wars, I really couldn't put down. I couldn't put it down. And for it being kind of a shorter event book, at least I think it's shorter compared to some of the other ones I've read, it's very it's very dense. It's very wordy. There's a lot of cool concepts in it. Hickman nails all the characters. He nails the war aspect of it, the secret battle going on between Reed and Doom. The central concept is awesome. The update of Battle World and the Secret Wars idea is great. I love the kind of Game of Thronesy aspect to it. It's all good shit, man. It's all really good shit. Doom is a fantastic villain, central character. Reed is a fantastic hero. Yeah, I honestly, I don't really have any complaints. I would put this at like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's just fantastic. I think that maybe it wouldn't be as enjoyable if you just read Secret Wars, not everything that came before. But if you read it with at least the Avengers, New Avengers, and Infinity as something before, as a lead up to it, I think that makes it absolutely fucking incredible. So yeah, Secret Wars, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. You pick. I think it's a 10 out of 10, I guess, really. But, I'll go with both. You can pick which one you like. All right, y'all. Thank you for watching. If you'd like me to, talk about anything, read anything in particular, review anything in particular, watch anything, you name it, I'm going to do it. So just please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Tell me how you like Secret Wars, what your favorite part of it is in the comments. And I will catch you all later. Peace.